today we're going to talk about the New Deal. So this is going to be President Roosevelt's plans for or programs, I guess, basically to combat the Depression. So he's going to get elected because, well, let's be honest, Hoover was horribly unpopular. Any president who reigns over a failing economy not going to get reelected. That's just kind of how history works. And so FDR is going to come in. He's going to institute a lot of programs, and then so that's what we're going to talk about today. Okay, so FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, he overwhelmingly was elected in 1932. So he was a Democrat running against the Republican Hoover, and nobody liked Hoover. Okay, so his campaign song was Happy Days Are Here Again, and he basically promised a new deal for Americans, and that's what's going to be obviously the name of his group of programs. Um, and so he's going to provide them with federal government aid. And so from 1933 to 1935, this is going to be the first New Deal. And in the first 100 days that he was in office, Congress is going to pass 15 bills that aimed for relief, recovery, and reform. And so we're going to talk about kind of what those things are, what those mean in the next slide here. So relief was immediate aid. Okay, so this is money and materials for the unemployed. It's putting people back to work. So programs like the FERA or FERA, that's the Federal Emergency Relief Administration. So that was actually providing money to people. Or the AAA, that was the Agricultural Adjustment Act that helped farmers. And then the CCC was the Civilian Conservation Corps that helped provide jobs to people in like national parks and that. And then recovery, so this is turning things around, helping industrial and the agricultural economy. And then reform was things that laws that prevent future problems. So, for example, the TVA, so that's the Tennessee Valley Authority, where they were basically given more power to kind of control the economy within the Tennessee Valley, which is one of the hardest hit and still to this day one of the poorest places in the United States. So success of the New Deal. So Republican and Democratic cooperation was needed to pass all these programs, and so FDR was really good at. When he became president, he said that he is going to seek advice from what he called his brain trust. So this was intellectuals in his cabinet, and basically he was kind of one of the first presidents to do this, where he just basically told people, "I don't know everything. I'm going to rely on experts to tell me." What I should do, and I'm going to take that advice and then I'm going to make my decisions. In addition, he also explained everything really well through what were called fireside chats. Okay, so he would get on the radio and he would broadcast to the US, to the whole country, about the programs that he is going to implement. And so this made him seem much more personable because he was talking to them like every week, and people really liked him. Okay, he was a very personable kind of guy. So African Americans believe that FDR was actually too concerned with votes from white Southern Democrats, and so they said there was slow and cautious change that angered minorities. So the civil rights did become better during the New Deal, but they were still not great for African Americans, Native Americans, and women. Um, excuse me, interfering too much or too little in people's lives. Um, there was a big debate about that, and people said, the government's doing too much. Others said it's not doing enough, and so there's a big debate. People didn't like. You can never make anybody or everybody happy. So, like the American Liberty League, for example, big business was basically concerned with FDR's kind of socialist leanings, and they wanted government out of the private enterprise. So they wanted less. They didn't want as many regulations and things of that nature that the New Deal was causing them to have. And then the farm program critics said basically they were throwing away food. So they were getting rid of food and they were burning up crops that could have fed the poor, um, because the farmers, the prices were way too low for them to sustain what they were doing. And so they tried to artificially inflate prices by throwing away food, and so there was less supply to meet the demand. Problem is when there's people starving in the streets, it's really hard to justify throwing away food, which is why in recent weeks we've seen the on Saturdays where you go down to Splash City and you can go get a box of food. They did that all through October, and they did that because of this, because that was a really big critic of FDR was that he was throwing away food when there's hungry people. Well, the economy's not doing great right now, and so instead of throwing away food for hungry people, they're giving it away. Okay, and so this was designed to stimulate the farmers and try to get prices higher. Okay, so Townsend, Long, Coughlin, and the Union Party. So Francis Townsend, these are all critics of FDR. Francis Townsend organized the elderly people in California to advocate for an old age pension plan. So, excuse me, this is going to lead to our Social Security system, which we'll talk about in a minute. But the thing is elderly people vote. Okay, they vote in much higher numbers than young people. Young people have a tendency not to vote very often, and so that's going to be something that's really going to get pushed. Huey Long, who's from Louisiana, so this is Huey Long, that's Francis Townsend. So Huey Long was from Louisiana, and he thought FDR was being used by wealthy businessmen and banks, and so he wanted to share our wealth, and he wanted to basically redistribute tax money from inheritance and incomes over $1 million. So if your parent died, then if they left you over $1 million and you were going to get that $1 million, he wanted to take that, anything over that, and then redistribute it. And then Father Coughlin, which is the guy on the bottom there, he persuaded his 30 million radio listeners that FDR was actually on the side of big business, and he formed the Union Party with Huey Long's successor, Gerald Smith, and they were basically trying to fight the big businesses. So the Second New Deal. So Eleanor Roosevelt was the first lady. She was a very, very active first lady. And people felt much more connected to the White House because of her work and her charitable causes. So from 1936 to 1939, they're going to start to implement the Second New Deal. And so this is going to expand relief, aid farmers and workers, and also provide for further economic reforms. Now, conservative judges were on the Supreme Court, and they opposed the New Deal. So FDR, what he tried to do was he tried to pack the court. This is something that has been talked about in recent weeks, where the Democrats have been talking a lot about packing the court. So what this is doing is it's just increasing the number of justices. Okay, so if we decide that we have 9 justices, and then if somebody like FDR decided, well, we're going to raise that number to 13, and then we get to have 4 judges that are our guys, and then we can implement our programs easier. Problem is this is not a very popular thing. First of all, you have to change the Constitution, which nobody likes to do. But they offended Congress, the court, the Democratic Party, and the American public. This was a huge, huge disaster. Nobody supported this, and it was basically seen as kind of a power grab by FDR, that he wanted to take over all 3 branches of government. So he is going to fail to change the number, and he's going to face greater congressional opposition after this to any additional New Deal laws. So, legacy of the New Deal. So it is going to reshape the role of the presidency. There is a lot more power in the presidency as a result of this. Okay, a lot more power. And what George Washington saw as the presidency in regards to his power looks nothing like what it does today. Because a lot of it what happened during the New Deal. The role of the federal government grew dramatically in Americans' lives. So the role of the government was really just to keep the peace before this. But now we've turned into a welfare state. Okay, so that's where many people believe that it's the government's job to take care of the needy. Okay, before the New Deal, it was seen as churches and charities that they would take care of the needy. But now people are looking to the government, and it also ushered women into more influential roles in government. And a lot of that had to do with Eleanor Roosevelt and her charitable causes and her being so active as a first lady. So did it work? No, is really the answer to that. If anything, it actually prolonged the Great Depression. So one thing that happens is in Britain, the depression hit. They did nothing. Their government did not get involved at all, and they recovered by 1932, 1933. The U.S. doesn't actually get out of the depression until 1948. Okay, so that's a big issue. So it was partially effective in restoring America's economic health, kind of. Unemployment did go down, but it was still very, very high. The gross national product went up slightly, so that's the amount that the nation produces. The federal debt, however, increased dramatically. We're still paying debt from the New Deal to this day, and it's only getting worse. Um, a lot of historians say that the war production from World War II got the U.S. out of the economy, but many economists would argue that it's not that. It was there was a big boom in the late 40s, early 50s in the housing market that got us out of it. So it kind of depends on who you ask. But as far as success goes, FDR's optimism and bold activism to solve problems did command respect, and he did definitely increase. He definitely increased power of the presidency. So it matters more now who the president is than it did before the New Deal. So, all right, that's all I got for you today. Oh no, it's not. Sorry, I got one more slide. My bad. Um, so there are New Deal programs that do still exist. So we still have the SEC. So the SEC is the Security Exchange Commission, and it was basically created to regulate the stock market, and it puts a lot of regulations on corporations and that, and especially like um, my brother is in finance, and he works for Stifel Nicholas, and he does compliance. So the SEC is on him all the time about making sure that the people he represents are compliant with the laws that the SEC and the regulations that the SEC has to enforce. Social Security obviously still exists, and this was intended as an insurance measure. So today it's used as an old age pension and also disability insurance. That is getting drained, and if I were you, I would not expect when you retire for that to even exist. I don't expect it for when I retire for it to exist. So you should definitely have a plan for when you retire that's not Social Security. The FDIC, so the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, this basically insures the bank deposits. So we talked about in the last set of notes how people went on bank runs and they would take all the money and then people just lost their money. Well, now, if all the money's gone out of the bank, my money's still there. Okay. Um, the Federal National Mortgage Association, this is also known as Fannie Mae. Basically, what it did is it purchased loans from private lenders and it freed them up to make more loans. Now, Fannie Mae does a lot of, you can actually go directly through Fannie Mae now to get loans of different types. So, all right, now that is all I have for you today. That is the last one, I promise. So don't forget to do your processor and have a wonderful day.